I'm Margaret, 25 female. I work as a financial analyst, a job that revolves around numbers, patterns, and the logical consequences of actions. For the past 2 years, I've been living at home with my parents and younger brother, a practical decision made to save money while I completed my master's degree in finance. My life was a neat ledger of income, expenses, and strategic planning for the future. I thought I understood the balance of my own family's dynamics, but I was wrong. I was about to learn that for 25 years, I had been reading the wrong spreadsheet. It took a $20 gift card for a coffee shop and a slice of stale cake to finally show me the truth, a truth that would lead me to pack a bag in the dead of night and dismantle my family's comfortable existence by morning. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The story of my emancipation begins not with my graduation, but with my brothers. Finley, 2 years my junior, had just completed his bachelor's degree in marketing. To hear our parents, Caroline and Noah, tell it, this achievement was on par with landing a man on the moon. The celebration they planned was nothing short of a coronation. Our backyard, normally a quiet space of manicured lawns and polite flower beds, was transformed into a festival ground. A massive white tent, the kind you see at lavish weddings, covered half the yard, its ceiling twinkling with professionally installed fairy lights. Caterers in crisp black uniforms moved silently among the guests, balancing trays of delicate hors d'oeuvres and glasses of sparkling champagne. My mother, an interior designer with a flair for the dramatic, had chosen a theme of golden futures, which meant everything was draped in gold and white. There were balloon arches, a custom-designed ice sculpture of his university's mascot, and even a DJ playing a curated list of Finley's favorite songs. I spent most of the party relegated to the role of an unpaid event coordinator, directing guests to the parking attendant my father had hired and ensuring the caterers kept the champagne flutes full. My parents were in their element. My father, Noah, an architect who valued precision and presentation, stood with a proud, proprietary air, accepting congratulations as if he himself had just passed 4 years of exams. My mother, Caroline, floated through the crowd, her laughter bright and theatrical, her hand often resting on Finley's shoulder as she introduced him to her clients and friends. "This is my brilliant son, Finley," she would announce, her voice ringing with a pride so fierce it bordered on aggressive. "We have such high hopes for him. He's destined for great things." Finley, for his part, soaked it all in. He had always been the sun in our family's solar system, and I, a distant, self-sufficient planet, was content to orbit without much notice. He was charming, easygoing, and had a way of making people feel important, a skill he had learned at our mother's knee. He moved through his party with a confident grin, accepting handshakes and backpats, the undisputed king of the day. The climax of the evening arrived just as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. My father clinked a spoon against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. He and my mother stood beside a large, sheet-covered object at the end of our driveway. "Finley," my father began, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother and I are so incredibly proud of the man you've become. You have worked so hard, and you deserve a reward that reflects your dedication." My mother took over, her eyes glistening. "We wanted to give you something to help you start this next chapter of your life, something to carry you toward that golden future we all know you're going to have." With a flourish, they pulled back the sheet. Underneath sat a brand-new, gleaming black sedan, a model that I knew started at $30,000. A giant, ostentatious red bow was perched on the hood. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. Finley's face split into a look of ecstatic disbelief. He ran to our parents, hugging them tightly as cameras flashed around them, capturing the perfect moment of familial devotion. I stood at the edge of the crowd, a fixed, polite smile on my face, and applauded along with everyone else. Inside, however, a small, cold knot was forming in my stomach. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was a feeling of profound dissonance. I was happy for Finley, he was my brother, and he looked genuinely thrilled. But I couldn't ignore the sheer scale of the gesture. It was extravagant, a grand declaration of value and worth. And as I watched them, I couldn't help but think about my own graduation, just 1 week away. I was finishing my master's degree in finance. See, a grueling 2-year program I had completed while working part-time to minimize my student loans. It was a significant achievement, one that represented countless sleepless nights and immense personal sacrifice. Whenever I had tried to bring it up, to ask what they might have in mind for a celebration, the response was always lukewarm and dismissive. "Oh, Margaret, we can't throw another party like Finley's," my mother had said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just too much, and besides, a master's isn't the same as a first degree. It's more of a continuation." My father had echoed the sentiment. "You're older, more established," he'd reasoned. "You don't need all that fanfare. We'll have a nice family dinner." That will be enough. A nice family dinner. The words echoed in my head as I watched Finley rev the engine of his new car, the sound roaring through the applause. I saw the looks on my parents' faces, the pure, unadulterated adoration for their son. It was a look I had never once received. I had always been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need anything. My achievements were expected, my independence a given. Finley's were a cause for celebration. I had rationalized it for years. He was the charming, social one. I was the serious, academic one. We were just different. But standing there, amidst the golden decorations and the flowing champagne, I felt a chilling premonition. The nice family dinner was going to be a test. I just didn't realize it was one I was destined to fail. The party raged on late into the night, but for me, the celebration was already over. I was simply counting down the days until my own, much quieter, Judgment Day. The day of my graduation was, in stark contrast to Finley's, a muted and perfunctory affair. The weather was gray and overcast, a fitting backdrop for the mood that had settled over me. My parents and Finley attended the ceremony, of course. They sat in the crowded auditorium, and I could spot them from the stage, looking bored and intermittently checking their phones. My mother managed a tight, vaguely supportive smile when my name was called, and my father gave a single, obligatory clap. Finley seemed to be texting for the entire duration. There were no whoops of joy, no proud tears, none of the vibrant emotion that had colored Finley's day. When I finally found them outside after the ceremony, the congratulations were brief. "Well done, Margaret," my father said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "Good to have that out of the way." My mother was more concerned with the logistics of leaving. "The traffic is going to be a nightmare," she sighed, already pulling her car keys from her purse. "Can we get a quick picture and go?" We took one photo. I stood between my parents in my cap and gown, holding my diploma. In the picture, I am smiling, but my eyes look tired. My parents' smiles don't reach their eyes at all. Finley, who took the photo, managed to cut off the top of my cap. The drive home was quiet. I tried to start a conversation about my plans, the job offers I was considering, but the topic was quickly diverted to Finley's complaints about setting up the insurance for his new car. When we arrived home, the house was silent. There were no balloons, no banners, no waiting guests. The remnants of Finley's party had been cleared away, but the ghost of it remained. The faint indentation in the lawn where the tent had stood, a single gold sequin glittering near the patio door. The promised nice family dinner was, as I had feared, an afterthought. My mother opened the refrigerator and pulled out a dish of leftover lasagna from 2 nights prior. "This will have to do," she announced, not looking at me. I didn't have time to cook anything special. So we ate in near silence at the kitchen table, the clinking of our forks against the plates the only sound. Finley wolfed his down and then disappeared into the living room to watch TV. My father retreated to his home office to catch up on some emails. I was left at the table with my mother as she cleared the plates. "I have something for you," she said suddenly, her voice devoid of any real warmth. She walked over to the counter where a pile of mail sat and picked up a small, plain white envelope. It wasn't even sealed. She handed it to me. "Happy graduation." I opened it. Inside was a gift card to the Daily Grind, a generic coffee shop chain. The amount printed on the card was $20. $20. For a moment, I just stared at it, the plastic rectangle feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. It wasn't the monetary value that struck me, as insulting as it was. It was the complete and utter lack of thought. It was a last-minute gas station purchase. A gift you give to a coworker you barely know. It was a message, loud and clear: your achievement is worth this. An afterthought. As if to punctuate the moment, my mother then went back to the refrigerator. Oh, there's still a little. Cake left from Finley's party if you want some. She pulled out a plastic container. Inside was a single, sad-looking slice of what had once been a magnificent, three-tiered cake. The elaborate gold frosting had been scraped away where Finley's name had been, leaving a mangled, bare patch of sponge. The slice itself was dry and crumbling at the edges. A gift card and leftover cake. A $30,000 car and a catered gala for him. $20 and crumbs for me. The disparity was so grotesquely clear, so profoundly unjust, that it transcended hurt and landed somewhere in the realm of cold, shocking clarity. All the little slights, the dismissive comments, the years of feeling like a secondary character in my own family, it all coalesced into this single, pathetic offering. I looked from the gift card to the mangled piece of cake, then up at my mother, who was watching me with an impatient, slightly defiant expression, as if daring me to complain. I didn't. I kept my face a perfect, placid mask. "Thank you," I said, my voice even. "This is thoughtful." Her expression softened into one of relief, perhaps even a little smugness. She had expected a fight, and when she didn't get one, she took it as acquiescence. I stayed quiet, letting the silence hang in the air. The quiet seemed to unnerve her more than an outburst would have. She fidgeted, wiping down the already clean counter. "Well," she prompted. "What's the matter?" I just looked at her. "Nothing," I said. That's when she delivered the final blow, the words that would sever the last thread of my loyalty. "Good," she sniffed. "You should be grateful. With everything we have going on, you should be happy we remembered it all." Be happy we remembered it all. The words hit me not like a slap, but like the calm, quiet click of a key turning in a lock, sealing something away forever. In that moment, the hurt evaporated, replaced by an icy resolve. I nodded slowly. "You're right, Mom, I understand." I picked up my phone, placed the $20 gift card next to the sad slice of cake, and under the guise of texting a friend, I snapped a single, high-resolution photograph. The evidence. Then I stood up. "I'm feeling a bit tired. I think I'll go to my room and rest." I walked upstairs, not to my room, but to the small home office where I kept my important documents. I packed my laptop, my passport, my degree certificate, and a change of clothes into my backpack. I walked past my bedroom, a space that suddenly felt like a stranger's, and went quietly down the back stairs. I didn't make a sound. I slipped out the side door, into the cool night air, and walked away without looking back. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I was never coming back. By morning, my phone was buzzing incessantly with calls and texts from them, but I didn't answer. I was already miles away, looking at a photograph of a gift card and a piece of cake, and planning my next move. The first call was to my Aunt Molly. She was my mother's older sister, but the two of them were night and day. Where my mother was all sharp angles and social calculation, Molly was soft, warm, and deeply empathetic. A high school librarian, she lived in a small, book-filled bungalow about an hour away. When I called her from a 24-hour diner, my voice trembling slightly, she didn't ask questions or demand explanations. She just said, "I'm on my way, send me the address." An hour later, she was wrapping me in a hug that smelled of old paper and Earl Grey tea, and for the first time in 12 hours, I felt like I could breathe again. I spent the next 2 days on her comfortable floral sofa, sleeping, drinking tea, and talking. I showed her the picture on my phone. She looked at it for a long time, her expression hardening. "Oh, Margaret," she sighed, her voice full of a sorrow that I knew wasn't just for me, but for the sister she had lost to bitterness and vanity long ago. "I'm so sorry. I always saw it, the way they treated you both, but I never knew it was this blatant." Her validation was a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was so deep. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic or oversensitive. She told me I was right. Aunt Molly's home became my sanctuary and my command center. My parents and Finley were in a full-blown panic. My phone was a constant barrage of texts. First came the feigned concern from my mother. "Margaret, where are you? We're worried sick." Then came the anger from my father. "This is an incredibly immature stunt, Margaret. Call us immediately." Finley's were the most telling. "Mom is freaking out. Whatever you're doing, you better stop. You're ruining everything." I ignored them all, my silence a weapon I was only just learning to wield. My immediate priority was securing my independence. I had a decent amount of savings from my part-time job and a few freelance analysis projects, enough to get started. I spent my third day at Molly's apartment hunting online, and by the afternoon, I had found a promising studio apartment near my new job, which was due to start in 2 weeks. The application required proof of funds and copies of my recent tax returns. I had my recent W-2s, but my older tax documents were saved on the family's shared cloud storage drive. My father, a man obsessed with digital organization, had set it up years ago as a central repository for important family documents. With a deep breath and a sense of trepidation, I logged in. The drive was organized with my father's typical, almost clinical precision. Folders were labeled: mortgage, insurance, taxes, vehicle registrations. I navigated to the taxes folder and found a subfolder with my name on it. As I was downloading the files I needed, my cursor hovered over another folder at the same level. It was cryptically labeled household. I had no reason to click on it. It was probably just files for utility bills or home repair receipts. But something, a gut instinct I couldn't explain, compelled me. I clicked. The folder contained more subfolders, one of which was labeled investments. This was strange. My father was a cautious accountant, not an investor. His mantra was always slow and steady savings. Inside the investments folder were dozens of scanned bank statements and spreadsheets dating back over 20 years. One file name caught my eye immediately: Margaret Education Fund. My heart began to pound. An education fund? My parents had always told me they were saving what they could, but that I would be responsible for the bulk of my university costs. It was one of the reasons I had worked so hard to get scholarships and had held a job throughout my studies. I clicked on the most recent PDF statement. It was from a reputable investment firm, and the account was a custodial trust fund. The name on the account was mine, Margaret L. Evans. The custodians were listed as Noah and Caroline Evans. I scrolled down to the summary, my eyes scanning the numbers. And then I saw it. The current balance. My breath caught in my throat. It was a staggering amount, well into 6 figures. It was more than enough to have paid for my entire undergraduate and master's degrees, with plenty left over to buy a home. I felt a wave of dizziness. This money existed. All this time, while I was working late shifts and living on ramen to avoid debt, this account was sitting there, growing. My shock quickly turned to confusion, then to suspicion. As a financial analyst, I was trained to look for anomalies, and my brain started working on instinct. I began opening older statements, working my way backward. I saw the initial deposit, a massive lump sum made when I was just 3 years old. A note in a corresponding spreadsheet, in my father's meticulous handwriting, explained it. Initial funding from mother's estate. Per will, held in trust for Margaret's education and establishment in adult life, to be transferred to her control upon completion of her highest level of education. My paternal grandmother. She had passed away when I was a toddler. I barely remembered her, but she had left this for me. For me, my parents were not benefactors, they were simply custodians. Their job was to manage it, not to withhold it. Then, my blood ran cold. I started cross-referencing the transaction history with my memory. I saw a large withdrawal of $50,000 about 7 years ago. The date corresponded exactly with the kitchen renovation my mother had suddenly decided they absolutely had to have. Another withdrawal, $30,000, 4 years ago. I remembered that year vividly. It was the year Finley turned 18, and my parents took him on a lavish, month-long backpacking trip across Europe. A trip I was told I couldn't come on because it was his special time, and I needed to work my summer job. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly and deceitful it was hard to look at. But the worst was yet to come. I sorted the transactions by date and scrolled to the past month. There it was. 2 weeks ago, the day after Finley's graduation ceremony. A single, clean withdrawal, $30,000, the exact price of his new car. They hadn't bought him a car with their money, they had bought it with mine. They had stolen from my inheritance, from the money my grandmother had left to secure my future and had gifted it to my brother. And then, a week later, they had handed me a $20 gift card and told me to be grateful they had remembered me at all. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me speechless. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a long-term, calculated fraud. The insult of the gift card wasn't just an insult, it was a cover-up. It was a pathetic attempt to perform the role of parents while they were actively robbing their own daughter. I leaned back in Aunt Molly's armchair, the laptop screen glowing in the dim light. The game had changed. This was no longer about hurt feelings. This was about justice. And I, the quiet, responsible financial analyst, was uniquely qualified to get it. For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. Fueled by a cold, righteous fury, I dove into the digital records of my family's betrayal. Aunt Molly's quiet bungalow became the headquarters of a forensic accounting investigation. She kept me supplied with endless pots of tea and sandwiches. Asking no questions, simply providing the silent support I needed. My work as a financial analyst had trained me for this. I was used to sifting through dense data, finding the narrative hidden within the numbers. Only this time, the narrative was my own life. I downloaded every file from the household and investments folders onto a new, encrypted hard drive. I created a master spreadsheet, my own private ledger of their deceit. I tracked every illicit withdrawal from my trust fund, creating columns for the date, the amount, and a justification purpose column that I filled in with chilling accuracy. There was the $15,000 withdrawn the year my parents replaced all their furniture, claiming they'd gotten an unbelievable deal. There was the $25,000 that vanished right before a series of lavish Christmas holidays, where Finley received every high-tech gadget he'd ever wanted, while I received practical, inexpensive sweaters. The pattern was undeniable and nauseating. The trust was their personal slush fund, a secret source of income used to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford and to shower my brother with gifts they couldn't provide. My independence and financial prudence hadn't been virtues they admired, they had been a convenience. My scholarships, my part-time jobs, my frugality, all of it had made their theft easier. I was the self-sufficient daughter who never asked for anything, making it simple for them to argue that the money was just sitting there, not being used. The legal documents for the trust were crystal clear. The funds were to be used for my maintenance, education, and benefit. Skimming money for home renovations and luxury cars for my sibling was a gross violation of their fiduciary duty as custodians. My father, the meticulous accountant, had to have known this. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, criminal act perpetrated over more than a decade. The most damning evidence I found was in a subfolder labeled projections. Inside was a spreadsheet created by my father. It modeled the trust fund's growth over time, but it also had columns for planned withdrawals. He had actually mapped out their thefts in advance. He had projected how much they could take each year without depleting the principal too much, ensuring the fund would still look healthy. The entry for Finley's graduation was there, planned 2 years in advance. F grad gift est. $30K. My graduation wasn't even mentioned. In their financial plans, as in their emotional ones, I was an afterthought, a non-entity. The rage I felt was so pure and so intense it felt like a physical force. It wasn't a hot, screaming rage, but a cold, diamond-hard fury that gave me an incredible sense of purpose. Every number I entered into my spreadsheet, every piece of evidence I compiled, was another brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. I started to dig into their other finances. From the shared drive, I had access to statements for their primary checking and savings accounts. A quick analysis showed a family living consistently beyond their means. My father's salary as an accountant and my mother's commission-based income as an interior designer were decent, but not enough to support the image they projected. Their mortgage was enormous, their credit card debt substantial. They were trapped in a cycle of maintaining appearances, and my inheritance was their escape hatch. I realized then that their resentment towards me wasn't just because I was different from Finley. They resented my financial independence because it highlighted their own failures. They resented that I did need them because their definition of love was transactional. Their affection was something to be bought and sold, and since I wasn't asking for anything, I wasn't worthy of investment. Finley, with his endless wants and easy charm, was the perfect recipient of their stolen generosity. He made them feel powerful and successful. I, with my quiet ambition and self-reliance, made them feel inadequate. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I found a string of emails between my mother and father from a few weeks before my graduation. My mother was complaining about having to get me a gift. "What do you even get a girl who wants nothing?" she wrote. "I suppose we have to do something. It will look bad if we don't." My father's reply was chillingly practical. "Keep it small. We can't draw any attention to our finances right now, not after the car. Just pick up a gift card or something. She won't make a fuss. She won't make a fuss." That was my defining characteristic in their eyes, the quiet girl who never complained. They had banked on it. They had leveraged my personality against me for years, assuming I would just accept the crumbs they offered and be grateful. They had underestimated me. They saw a quiet daughter, not a forensic analyst in training. They saw a placid exterior, not a me. ND that could deconstruct their web of lies, number by number, transaction by transaction. By the time I closed my laptop on the second day, I had a nearly 200-page file, a meticulously documented history of their fraud. It contained scanned statements, highlighted transactions, relevant excerpts from the trust documents, and their own incriminating emails. And on the very first page, as Exhibit A, was the photo I had taken in their kitchen, the $20 gift card and the sad, crumb-covered slice of leftover cake. It was the perfect symbol of their crime, a pathetic, insulting gesture designed to cover up a grand theft. The investigation was over. Now, it was time to build the plan. With my evidence compiled into an undeniable case, the raw, emotional fury began to subside, replaced by a focused, strategic calm. A screaming match or a tearful confrontation would be useless. It would give them the opportunity to twist the narrative, to paint me as ungrateful, hysterical, or mistaken. My parents, especially my mother, were masters of emotional manipulation. They would turn my pain into a weapon against me. No, my response had to be executed in a language they could not argue with, the cold, unassailable language of the law. I spent a day researching financial and estate lawyers. I didn't want a simple family lawyer. I needed a shark, someone who specialized in fiduciary misconduct and embezzlement. I found him through a recommendation from a former professor, a man named Arthur Kendrick, known for his sharp mind and his utter lack of sentimentality when it came to financial justice. I booked a consultation, and 2 days later, I was sitting in his intimidatingly sleek downtown office, my encrypted hard drive on the polished mahogany table between us. Arthur was an older man with piercing blue eyes and an expression that suggested he'd seen every form of human greed imaginable. He listened to my story without interruption, his face impassive. I laid it all out: the 2 graduations, the gift card, the accidental discovery, and the details of the financial records. Then, I plugged the hard drive into his system and walked him through my master spreadsheet and the corresponding documents. I watched his expression shift from professional neutrality to something approaching genuine shock. He clicked through the files, his eyes scanning the numbers, the dates, the incriminating emails. He paused on the photo of the gift card and cake. He stared at it for a full 30 seconds before looking up at me. "Ms. Evans," he said, his voice a low rumble. "In 30 years of practicing law, I have seen some audacious acts of fraud. This is in a class of its own. The sheer gall of it is breathtaking." He leaned back in his chair. "Your father's meticulous record-keeping is his own undoing. This is not just a civil case of fiduciary misconduct. This is criminal. Embezzlement, wire fraud. They could genuinely face prison time." Hearing him confirm the severity of their actions was incredibly validating. I wasn't overreacting. This was as bad as I thought it was. "I don't necessarily want them in prison," I said, my voice steady, "but I want what is mine, every cent they took, adjusted for market growth. And then I want them out of my life, permanently." Arthur nodded, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. "I can certainly arrange that," he said. The threat of criminal prosecution is a powerful negotiating tool. They will settle, and they will settle quickly. We will draft a demand letter and a civil complaint. We will sue for the stolen principal, punitive damages, and all legal fees. The plan we formulated over the next hour was precise and ruthless. Step 1 was to completely disentangle myself from them. On Arthur's advice, I opened new bank accounts at a different institution and transferred all of my legitimate savings. I signed a lease on the studio apartment I had found, paying the deposit and first month's rent. I was creating a new, independent life for myself, one that they had no claim to and no visibility of. Step 2 was preparing the legal assault. Arthur's team worked quickly. Within a week, they had drafted a formidable legal document that laid out my parents' crimes in excruciating detail. It was a masterpiece of legal devastation, citing specific statutes they had violated and including copies of the most damning pieces of evidence. The final pages detailed our demands: the immediate return of all misappropriated funds, a sum that, with interest and projected growth, was nearly double what they had taken, plus an additional amount for damages. The document also included paperwork for a restraining order, legally barring them from contacting me or coming near my home or place of work. While Arthur was preparing the legal documents, I focused on my own escape. I arranged for movers to go to my parents' house to retrieve my belongings. I didn't go myself. Instead, I gave them a key Aunt Molly had and a detailed, itemized list of what to pack. I instructed them to go during a weekday when I knew my parents would be at work and Finley would be out. It was a strange, disembodying experience, having strangers pack up your childhood. But it was necessary. I needed a clean break, with no chance for a dramatic, manipulative confrontation at the door. My parents and Finley, meanwhile, had escalated their attempts to contact me. The texts and voicemails had shifted from worried to furious to pitifully pleading. My mother left long, rambling messages, her voice cracking, talking about how I was tearing the family apart over a silly misunderstanding. My father left stern, authoritarian messages, demanding I cease this childish behavior and come home to talk things out like adults. They had no idea what was coming. They thought this was about my hurt feelings. They thought they could manage me just as they always had. On the day my new job started, I felt a sense of rebirth. Walking into the office, meeting my new colleagues, and diving into work that I was good at felt like stepping into the life that was supposed to be mine all along. That evening, I returned to my own apartment, a space that was entirely mine, filled with my own things. There was no tension, no unspoken resentment, no one to please but myself. The silence was beautiful. That night, I called Arthur and gave him the green light. The final part of the plan was in motion. I would see my family one last time, but it wouldn't be on their terms, it would be on mine. After 2 weeks of complete silence from me, my family was desperate. Their barrage of calls and texts had reached a fever pitch. I knew they were panicking, not out of genuine concern for my well-being, but out of a fear of losing control and having their perfect family image shattered. I decided it was time to respond. I sent a single, simple text to a group chat with my parents and Finley. I am willing to meet for dinner to discuss this. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., La Valette Restaurant. I will make the reservation. This is the only time and place I will meet. La Valette was a quiet, expensive French restaurant downtown, neutral territory, public, and a place where a dramatic scene would be highly unwelcome. It was a power move, and I knew they would recognize it as such. My mother responded almost instantly. "Of course, darling, we'll be there. We just want to talk." The relief in her text was palpable. They thought they had won. They believed I was finally caving, coming back to the fold, ready to be soothed with empty apologies and promises to do better. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. The next evening, I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I chose a corner booth, giving me a clear view of the entrance but also a sense of privacy. I was dressed in a sharp, professional blazer and slacks, the uniform of my new life. I felt calm, centered, and powerful. The nervous, accommodating girl who had accepted a $20 gift card with a polite thank you was gone forever. They arrived together, a united front of anxiety. My father looked tired and stressed. My mother's face was drawn and tight beneath her carefully applied makeup, and Finley just looked annoyed, like he was being forced to participate in a tedious chore. They slid into the booth opposite me, their expressions a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Margaret, thank God," my mother began, reaching across the table to take my hand. I subtly moved it out of her reach to pick up my water glass. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she masked it with a pained smile. "We have been so worried. Disappearing like that, you have no idea what you've put us through." "I have a very good idea of what I've been through," I said, my voice cool and even. "But we can get to that." I steered the conversation toward neutral topics, asking my father about his work, my mother about her latest design project. I wanted them to get comfortable, to let their guard down. The waiter came, and they ordered the Moe's tea, expensive items on the menu, along with a pricey bottle of wine, a clear attempt to re-establish the old dynamic of them as the generous providers and me as the recipient. Finley was sullen and mostly silent, tapping away on his phone. "Look, Maggie," he finally chimed in, using a childhood nickname I despised. "Can we just get this over with? Apologize to Mom and Dad so we can all go home. This whole dramatic act is getting old." I just looked at him, a small, knowing smile on my face. "Don't worry, Finley, we're almost there." Throughout the main course, they performed their well-rehearsed play. My father lectured me on family loyalty and the importance of communication. My mother talked about forgiveness and how all families have misunderstandings. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. They framed my departure as an irrational, emotional overreaction to a minor slight. Not once did they offer a genuine apology. Not once did they acknowledge the deep, systemic nature of their neglect. They were simply trying to manage the situation, to smooth things over so that everything could go back to the way it was. They needed me back in my box, quiet and compliant. As the waiter cleared our plates, I knew it was time. I reached into the leather satchel beside me and pulled out a thick, 9x12 manila envelope. I slid it across the table. It landed on the white tablecloth with a soft, definitive thud. "What's this?" my father asked, eyeing it with suspicion. "This is my side of the conversation," I said. My mother scoffed. "Margaret, we don't need a letter, just talk to us." "Open it," I commanded, my voice dropping the polite, conversational tone. It was now cold, hard, and unfamiliar to them. Hesitantly, my father picked up the envelope and broke the seal. He pulled out the contents. My mother and Finley leaned in to look. I watched their faces as they processed what they were seeing. I saw the exact moment the truth landed. It wasn't a letter. It was a full copy of the civil complaint filed against them by Arthur Kendrick's law firm. It was a formal demand for repayment of all misappropriated funds, totaling over $500,000 once market growth and damages were calculated. It was a copy of the petition for a restraining order. And stapled to the front page, as Exhibit A, was a glossy, color photograph of the $20 gift card next to the piece of leftover cake. The color drained from my mother's face. She looked like she had been physically struck, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. My father's hands began to tremble as he flipped through the pages, his accountant's mind recognizing the bank statements, the transaction histories, the proof of his own crimes. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. "How?" he whispered. "You knew," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table like a shard of ice. "You knew about the trust, you knew the rules, and you stole from me for over a decade." Finley was the last to understand. He was just staring at the numbers, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What is this? What money?" I turned my gaze to him. "The car, Finley," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "The $30,000 car they bought you for your graduation, they bought it with my inheritance. The money our grandmother left for me. Everything they ever gave you, every lavish vacation, every expensive toy. It was all paid for with money they stole from me." Finley stared at me, then at our parents, his cocky smirk finally gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. My mother started to sob, quiet, hiccuping sounds of pure shock. My father just sat there, frozen, the legal documents shaking in his hands. I stood up from the table, my movements calm and deliberate. I took a few bills from my purse and placed them on the table. "That's for my meal," I said. As for the rest, I believe you'll need to start saving your money." I looked at them one last time, three strangers whose lives I had just irrevocably shattered with a single manila envelope. There was no triumph in my heart, no joy, just a vast, empty sense of closure. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to sit with the bill for their expensive meal and the much, much higher cost of their betrayal. I didn't look back. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but a swift and silent demolition. Arthur had been right. Faced with an airtight case and the very real threat of criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, my parents folded immediately. Their lawyer, a man who seemed utterly flabbergasted by the mountain of evidence his client's own daughter had compiled against them, advised them to settle without a fight. The legal process was brutal and efficient. There were no emotional courtroom showdowns, no tearful pleas for forgiveness. It was all handled through lawyers, a cold exchange of documents and financial statements. They didn't have the funds to pay back what they owed. Their lifestyle of smoke and mirrors had left them with significant debt and very few liquid assets. The settlement agreement forced them into a position they had spent their entire lives trying to avoid, one of public humility and financial ruin. The first casualty was Finley's car. It was sold, the $30,000 from the sale being the first installment paid directly to me. I heard through Aunt Molly that Finley was devastated, but my capacity for sympathy was gone. The car had never been his to begin with. The second, and much larger, casualty was their house. The house I grew up in, the one my mother had so lovingly decorated to project an image of effortless wealth and success, had to be put on the market. The equity from the sale was the only way they could satisfy the bulk of the judgment against them. They were forced to downsize to a small, rented townhouse in a less fashionable part of the city, a tangible, daily reminder of their downfall. The social humiliation was, I imagine, the cruelest part of the punishment for my mother. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect, successful family had crumbled. Rumors spread quickly in their social circle, and the truth, or at least a version of it, got out. They were no longer the pillars of the community. They were a cautionary tale. While their world was collapsing, mine was being built, for the first time, on a foundation of my own making. The settlement money, my rightful inheritance, was transferred to my accounts. I didn't go on a spending spree. My years of forced frugality had ingrained in me a deep respect for financial security. I met with a trusted financial advisor and invested the majority of it wisely, creating a safety net that would protect me for the rest of my life. With a portion of the funds, I made a down payment on a beautiful condominium in the heart of the city, with a large balcony overlooking the skyline. It was a space that felt truly mine, filled with light and possibility. My job was going exceptionally well. The focus and precision that had allowed me to uncover my family's fraud made me a natural at financial analysis. I received a promotion within my first year, my confidence growing with each new success. My relationship with Aunt Molly blossomed. She became the mother figure I had always needed but never had, supportive, wise, and unconditionally loving. We had dinner together every Sunday, a new tradition that replaced the hollow ritual of my family's past. She never once said, "I told you so." She simply celebrated my newfound freedom and happiness. As for my parents and Finley, after the final legal papers were signed, their communication ceased entirely. The restraining order was in place, but they didn't test it. The silence from them was absolute. There were no more angry texts, no pleading voicemails, no attempts to contact me through relatives. It was as if, once they could no longer control me or benefit from me, I had ceased to exist for them. And I found that I was perfectly okay with that. The ties were severed, and I felt no sense of loss, only relief. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony at night, looking out at the city lights, I think about that night in their kitchen. I think about the profound insult of that $20 gift card and the stale, leftover cake. I still have the photo saved on my phone, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of my own strength. They thought it was a token of my worthlessness. They were wrong. It was the catalyst for my liberation. It was the price of my freedom. They had underestimated the quiet daughter, the one who didn't make a fuss. They never realize that the quietest people are often the ones who are listening the most intently, the ones who see the numbers on the ledger and understand exactly what they mean. They had built their comfortable lives on a foundation of lies, and I, the daughter they ignored, was the one who finally called their debt due. The silence from their side of the city is a sound I have come to cherish. It is the sound of peace. It is the sound of a balanced ledger. It is the sound of me, finally, being free.